How many bikers do you think have ended up on the taxpayer teat on the big build?
Hundreds.
From building bad...
It felt to me like I was watching an episode of The Sopranos.
...to building worse.
It's nothing short of putrid.
Why the rot at the militant CFMEU hasn't stopped.
He sits at the centre of the web. This web is spreading all over the construction industry in Victoria.
Tonight on 60 Minutes.
We're talking about millions of dollars. It's like a cancer spreading.
Business uninterrupted as the rip-offs continue.
Does that mean that ultimately the taxpayer is underwriting those very payments?
Yes.
And this is what the union thugs do in their lunch break. So why won't the Victorian Premier answer our questions?
There's been many reports of criminal behaviour. Has there been a single public official held to account?
That's next on 60 Minutes.
When 60 Minutes, The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald exposed massive corruption in the country's most powerful construction union last July, state and federal governments were so horrified they promised immediate action. Investigations were launched, an administrator was appointed to run the CFMEU, and influential union figures, including bikies who'd wheedled their way into the organisation, were sacked. It looked like the rot was finally over. But tonight, I can tell you it's not. In fact, it's business as usual for many of the thugs associated with the CFMEU, as they continue bullying and ripping off anyone who stands in their way. It's early last Thursday morning, and Australian federal police officers are descending on a Melbourne home. This raid is part of an operation codenamed Rye, into alleged criminality and corruption involving the CFMEU. But the target today isn't one of the bikies or gangland figures that have infiltrated the union. It's a suburban accountant. His name is Charles Pellegrino, and like the police, I've been investigating him for the last few months. I've wanted to know why businesses in his name have been receiving secret payments from building companies around the country. Authorities suspect that Charles Pellegrino is simply a frontman for a series of dummy companies. The firms are allegedly involved in a scheme that has corrupted the union and parts of the building industry for years. But it's another man who's suspected of pulling the strings. He's one of Australia's most infamous underworld figures, and his name is Mick Gatto. As his accountant was being raided, Mick Gatto was on the other side of town, among friends, supporting his union mates at the funeral of the father of a former CFMEU boss. Where does Gatto sit in terms of the construction sector?
Well, he's right at the top. He's the master. Now, everything flows from him. He sits at the centre of the web. This web is spreading all over the construction industry in Victoria.
Jeffrey Watson SC is no stranger to investigating and exposing scandals. Last year, he was tasked by the newly appointed CFMEU administrator to probe corruption in the construction sector. In just a few short months, what he's discovered is that despite massive media exposure, the rot and wrongdoing in the industry has not stopped. So concerned is Jeffrey Watson, he's taken the extraordinary step of talking to us, mid-investigation. Jeffrey, you've taken on serious political corruption in the Labor Party and the Coalition. How does the CFMEU compare?
Corruption in the CFMEU, the criminal conduct, it's much worse, far more intense and more serious than anything I've seen before.
Why so?
Well, it involves violence.
Mick Gatto's name was one of the first to come up in Watson's investigation. He's best known as one of the only survivors of Melbourne's bloody gangland wars, and gained infamy after being cleared of a murder charge in 2005. Less well known is that Gatto has loomed large over the construction sector for decades. In 2002, a Royal Commission declared him a standover man, used by building firms to win union support. Now, Watson is revealing for the first time how 2 decades on, Gatto has entrenched his operation, thanks to his extraordinary connections to CFMEU insiders.
I've spoken to several people who have had approaches from Gatto, successful approaches, by the way, for money. It's plain, straightforward intimidation. And it's designed to scare you into submission.
Yeah, so look, we're pretty good at what we do, I guess. And
Gatto rejects all suggestions of wrongdoing. He says he's a legitimate businessman.
I look after a few builders and they pay me to do their IR, which is looking after the unions so that they don't lose productivity.
He describes his services as professional business solutions, and he doesn't shy away from his success, giving interviews to those who follow his script.
I'm not sure how the world is travelling, but in the industrial relations area of the world, things are just on the up. This is Mick Gatto here. He's Mick. Times are tough.
Right, Sam. Well, things are tough.
Yeah,
I'm lucky I do a lot of other things, mate.
Yeah, I won't ask what they are, but of course, industrial relations is big, and Mick is the biggest, as you can see. Diamond rings, cigars, rollers.
While it's clear business is booming for the gangland figure, he's more secretive about how he actually operates behind the scenes. This phone recording we've obtained provides clues about his tactics.
Just want to sit down, just have a chat and find a common denominator. If you're interested, if you're not interested, we'll go away and just whatever happens, happens.
The conversation occurred in late 2023. Gatto was pressuring a developer over a building dispute and implying he has the power to shut down any building site in Victoria.
I could stop anyone doing anything, mate. And I say that respectfully. I don't want to be a smarty. We can cause you grief. I know you've got enough grief in your life already.
Gatto might well say, well, so what? I'm sorting out the problem. What's the issue with that?
Well, there's a big issue with that. He uses illegitimate means to stand over people and threaten people to come to a resolution.
A former detective superintendent with the Victoria Police, Peter DeSanto, was one of the nation's most highly regarded organised crime and corruption investigators. He knows Mick Gatto's uncompromising style very well.
I think there's clear evidence that he is a man who uses fear. His associates are all criminals.
Gatto's business model of cutting deals with a corrupted union should have come to a crashing halt in July last year, when 60 Minutes, The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald exposed the truly rotten culture in the CFMEU.
Well, the CFMEU has placed its Victorian branch into administration following allegations the organisation was overrun by underworld figures.
Federal and state governments backed intervention.
It should be condemned, it should be isolated, should be stamped out.
And the Victorian Premier, Jacinta Allen, promised a major inquiry.
This is a rotten culture that must be pulled out by its roots.
But in the 8 months since the Premier's dramatic press conference, things haven't changed all that much, at least not in Gatto land.
One of Gatto's business models is disputes, industrial disputes, on building sites or in fabrication and manufacturing yards off-site. And workers are stopped. Now, stopping a building site, even for a day, will cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to the head contractors. Gatto will then make contact and say, well, you know, I hear you've got a problem. I can sort this out with you. And in no time at all, it is sorted out on the guarantee of a payment. And those payments are tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands, and sometimes they're ongoing quarterly payments. We're talking about millions of dollars. It's in the millions. I just don't know how many millions of dollars are taken out through those means.
How does Gatto conceal the money you say he's receiving?
As best I can work out, invoices are sent through dummy companies, but the addresses all come back to one place, and that's Gatto's accountant, Charles Pellegrino.
It's why the AFP raided Pellegrino's house and office last Thursday. He hasn't been charged, but the investigation is ongoing.
What intelligence have you collected about whether that business model is operating under Gatto's watch today?
It's still operating as we're sitting here speaking, and I've seen evidence of him requiring those payments to be made under threat in the last few weeks.
Both Jeffrey Watson and the Australian Federal Police are following the same money trail. It reveals that over a dozen building companies are paying Mick Gatto or his gangland associates. The firms are charged anywhere from $30,000 to $600,000 for so-called consulting services. But what's even more troubling is some of these same companies are working on the Victorian government's biggest projects. With road and rail projects spanning the state, the Big Build is one of the largest infrastructure schemes in the country, and government money flowing to individual sites is being used to pay off a notorious underworld figure.
Is it right that subcontractors on the Big Build have been paying Gatto?
Yes, I've seen evidence of it.
Does that mean that ultimately the taxpayer is underwriting those very payments?
Yes.
How can that be permitted to occur on state government projects?
Well, nobody's stopping it.
But the rot on the Big Build doesn't end with Mick Gatto. Up next,
how many bikies do you think have ended up on the taxpayer teat on the Big Build?
I would say hundreds.
When the Victorian government announced what they called the Big Build in 2015, it was to be one of the most ambitious infrastructure projects ever undertaken in Australia. This network of new road and rail developments is costing billions of dollars. And with such vast amounts of money up for grabs, it's not only the construction companies that want a slice of the pie.
What happened to Gatto's mediation business, union business, when the Big Build began to explode?
It flourished. It was like bees to the honeypot.
Already entrenched in the construction sector, gangland figure Mick Gatto seized the opportunity to profit from the Big Build. But according to former Detective Superintendent Peter DeSanto, he isn't the only gangland figure who has made bank. Victoria's bikies have also been on the gravy train.
How many bikies do you think have ended up on the taxpayer teat on the Big Build?
I would say at least hundreds.
Hundreds?
On various sites and projects all over the state.
These are flat-out bikies or bikies and their associates?
Bikies and their associates.
Like Gatto, they were there courtesy of the CFMEU, whose hold over the construction industry in Victoria extended to Labor's Big Build.
People have described the CFMEU, at least in parts, as a crime gang. Do you agree?
I agree.
Why?
Well, I think that you've got so many criminals within its ranks. A legitimate operation, I don't think is necessary to have criminals within its ranks or organised crime figures within its ranks or do business with other organised crime figures.
How big is the problem now?
It's bigger than significant. It's a massive issue. Massive.
Why were those types of entities, bikies, criminal types, wanting so badly to get onto the Big Build?
Oh, good Lord, have you seen the sort of money that you paid to get on those sites? It's a protection racket. It's very old-fashioned.
Last year, Senior Barrister Jeffrey Watson SC was appointed Chief Investigator by the Administrator given the task of taking over and cleaning up the CFMEU.
When I started conducting this inquiry, it felt to me like I was watching an episode of The Sopranos.
Within just a few months, his inquiries exposed the Big Build as ground zero for rorting bikies.
You get appointed to a particular job and you might only come once a week or once a fortnight, and the pay rates are quite extraordinary. I mean, it's quite common to earn $3,000 a week, $5,000 a week. You can even get up to $10,000 a week. You can see what's happened. It's just become a place of resort or retreat for bikies to come in and take control over business. It's like a cancer spreading.
What do you see when you see this map?
Well, I see a network of gangland figures spread over the whole of the Melbourne metropolitan area.
We knew things were bad, but the true scale of the Big Build bikie infiltration has turned out to be much bigger than first thought. On multiple government worksites across Melbourne, CFMEU-backed bikie-linked crooks reigned supreme.
We've got here Joel Leavitt. What sort of a figure was Joel Leavitt?
Joel Leavitt was a very serious bikie with a terrible criminal record and a very violent person.
Should people like Joel Leavitt have popped up on these state government sites?
Oh, of course not.
His good mate Johnny Walker spent time in jail for manslaughter, bikie club member at least, former, a notorious reputation.
Well, sorry, his name is Johnny Two Guns Walker. That's an unpromising start, you'd have to agree. Yeah, same thing.
Leavitt and Walker, along with a few of Mick Gatto's mates, were just some of the notorious figures on major sites. Others associated with the rebels, the Comanchero and the Mongols were also thriving elsewhere on the project.
In the wake of our reporting last year, several high-profile bikies were forced off the big build. But many other bikie and gangland types simply adapted to keep making money off government projects. Meanwhile, state Labor has done nothing to explain in any detail how this all happened, or why not a single public servant or politician has been held to account for a scandal that's left taxpayers funding those in the underworld.
Back when he worked for the Victoria Police, Peter DeSanto warned the Victorian government, but says it did nothing.
The government were told a decade ago that OMCGs were infiltrating various industries, and that included the construction industry. I sat in meetings with representatives of the government and briefed them.
There's no doubt that senior people in the bureaucracy know about it, because I've received information suggesting that they were directly told about it.
We do know, though, there's not been a single substantive civil or criminal action taken by any agency in Victoria.
The political solutions haven't been put in place. Nobody's done anything to try and stop it. Now we're here with the administration in place and we're trying to pick up some pieces.
Jeffrey Watson agrees that blame for this ongoing mess lies in part with the Allen government and its ineffectual attempt at a public inquiry known as the Wilson Report.
The Wilson Report, it seemed to me to be more of a cover-up. Again, there was this generalisation. Oh, bad culture here, bad culture there. There was no solution. Given that there was a governmental inquiry, it needed actually to go inside the doors of the senior bureaucrats and actually into the ministerial offices in Spring Street. It didn't do any of that. There was, I'm afraid, a terrible disappointment.
I mean, you've called it just now a cover-up.
Well, it operates as a cover-up because it didn't get to the bottom of anything.
But when I raised the issue with Premier Jacinta Allen last week, her response was as disappointing as her government's lack of meaningful action.
Is there a single public official who's so far been held to account for this scandal?
So if there is any report of criminal behaviour, I would expect any individual to be held to account.
There's been many reports of criminal behaviour. Has there been a single public official held to account?
Again, if there are any reports of criminal behaviour, they should absolutely be referred to Victoria Police.
Respectfully, you've not answered a single question I've asked. You directly answered it. Was the Wilson review a cover-up?
No.
Like most politicians, Premier Allen is skilled at avoiding difficult issues. But when it comes to the rottenness at the CFMEU, there are some things that just can't be ignored. Coming up, damning evidence of union thuggery. How a delegate takes care of business during his lunch break. In the middle of last year, a link to a video was sent anonymously to CFMEU headquarters and quickly circulated among union insiders. What it showed was utterly shocking. It's a cowardly attack on a woman, carried out by a CFMEU health and safety representative while on his lunch break from a Victorian government rail project.
Oh, just feel utterly sick to my stomach watching that.
Jess Hill is a leading domestic violence and women's rights campaigner.
The fact that he's the health and safety rep for the union, I mean, like, it's, aside from just the utter shock of the violence, that's just farcical.
Union officials say the man in this video is also associated with the rebels and just one of many bikie-affiliated thugs who infiltrated the Victorian government's big build.
Was it exceedingly obvious that as soon as bikies began to hold positions of power on big build sites, that violence towards others on those sites, including women, would follow?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, that's what, isn't that kind of what they're there for? I mean, in a way, like you're bringing these guys on as muscle.
If anyone knows what the treatment dished out to women is like on CFMEU-controlled state government jobs, it's Lily Munro.
It's nothing short of putrid. I hate to say it, but we just don't belong there.
Why are you hired?
The way you look, what use you can be to, the men.
When Lily first started working on the big build in 2022, she was making good money in traffic management. But it wasn't long before she started to receive requests for sexually explicit favours from CFMEU figures as well as building firm superiors working on site. She received these messages from an employee of the Southern Project Alliance, a man with the power to make or break her career. What was he offering in return?
I think he said to me, I'll get you on the occupation.
I'll get you on this state government site in return for photos of yourself.
Yeah, that's not an uncommon occurrence. He thought that I was stupid enough and that vulnerable and desperate as a single mum to earn money that, yeah, I would be stupid enough to send him some photographs and in return for work.
How can this happen on a state government site?
Your guess is as good as mine.
Exactly how much control the union wielded would become apparent on another Victorian government site. While working at the redevelopment of the Footscray Hospital, Lily was exposed to a violent ice-using criminal who'd recently been released from jail for stalking and threatening to kill a woman, a man placed on that site on the orders of the CFMEU. So you enter a room with him. What happens?
He goes, do you mind if I smoke? Then I turned around and he was pulling out a crack pipe and smoking that with ice in it and blowing it in my face and locking the door of the storeroom. He was off his face.
Was it scary?
Terrifying.
Exists in our industry.
Lily claims she reported the incident to the CFMEU senior official responsible for women's rights, Lisa Zanata.
There is nothing more powerful when women come together and they support one another.
But instead of union support, Lily says she was chastised by Zanata.
She yelled at me and told me off and told me why would I do something like that. No, we had to get him drug tested and he came up clean. And she said, they don't want you back there, you're never welcome back there. And from that point on, apparently, I troubled her. So anytime she found out that I was on a site, I'd be off the site.
What did that mean for you?
I can't work. I can't work on any site. I can't provide for my family.
The claims by Lily of being refused shifts by the union on the big build are not isolated. We now know the victim who was bashed on camera by a CFMEU health and safety rep was also blacklisted. And then there is a third shocking case involving another young woman. She was bashed outside her worksite by the relative of a powerful union boss. But when she complained, she was also banned from working on state government projects.
Hi, how you going?
Good, thank you. Can you talk?
Yeah.
What you're hearing is a telephone call in which Lisa Zanata discusses a complaint from the young assault victim that she has been blacklisted.
And it was communicated to you that the project had dropped you and they didn't have any more work for you.
During the call, Zanata lets on the union is aware of multiple cases where women who have been bashed by men have suffered a second time by being forced off work sites.
It was a general comment that I made about women in these situations that can continue to work because of violent men, right?
But it gets worse. Zanata admits she inadvertently spoke with the union officials related to the victim's abuser, putting her in even more danger.
I've come to you saying that I was scared to approach the union because of family and you've had a conversation with his brother about me, telling him what, like, Dad, do you realise how, like, not, like,
No, probably
not okay?
Probably not, no.
And what you've,
Okay.
and I'm sorry, I don't mean to be rude, it's the worst possible thing that could have been done.
All right, well, I sincerely apologise, and how can I help it? How can I fix it for you?
Like, I don't mean to be rude, but you really...
Yeah, okay.
Domestic violence campaigner Jess Hill says the call shows how the union has let down female workers on the big bill.
The response that you're hearing on the phone in this conversation is just so woefully inadequate. There's just such a complete lack of responsibility being taken by the very person who is employed to represent her interests.
Does responsibility also flow to the state government, given that these sites are state government sites?
Well, this is what you've got to ask, right, is where does the buck actually stop? And we can get tangled up in legal questions about who is legally responsible for protecting these women, but ultimately, this is taxpayer money. So I think Victoria has a unique responsibility to be fronting up and making sure women on these sites are protected.
I've seen a lot of terrible things, but the way that these women were treated, they may be amongst the most terrible. I can tell you right now, as from after this interview, I'll be going back to the administrator and I'm confident that he will place it right at the top of the list.
The list of things for the CFMEU administration to stamp out is long. No one is more aware of how big the job is than the chief investigator, Geoffrey Watson.
What is the cost of not getting this right?
It all depends whether you want to live in a society where there are people operating outside the law, violently, taking money which they don't deserve. We can't have that.
We asked Mick Gatto about the payments made to Charles Pellegrino's firms and if he or his associates were the beneficiaries of any of that money. Mr Gatto told me he couldn't possibly provide any assistance. Hello, I'm Nick McKenzie. Thanks for watching 60 Minutes Australia. Subscribe to our channel now for brand new stories and exclusive clips every week. And don't miss out on our extra minutes segments and full episodes of 60 Minutes on 9now.com.au and the 9Now app.